Hello, and welcome to The Thin Blue Mind. Each week we will be looking at current policing issues and topics within the UK. Our regular panel consists of Steve Bradshaw, who is a TV and theatre actor, Richard Horton, author, and me, Dave Thomas, broadcaster. What we all have in common is over 80 years of combined police service. Now retired, we will be providing opinion and insights from the unique position of having been there and done it. Steve spent the majority of his service on firearms before being promoted to inspector, where he was a force incident manager. Richard was a career detective before going back into uniform as a response sergeant. Myself, I spent the majority of my service on the roads policing unit before going into CID and child protection. You may not agree with everything we say, but we will make you think. The Thin Blue Mind with Bradshaw, Horton and Thomas. Policing insights and opinions. Well, hello, and welcome to this episode of The Thin Blue Mind. This week we're going to be looking at the complex issue of police recruitment. Now, you've got three dinosaurs sat around the table at the moment, and I think all our experiences are pretty similar in that we would have applied to join the police force. It took about 18 months to get in. We would have had a week at headquarters where we would have your fingerprints taken and they'd teach you such skills as how to iron a shirt, etc. Then you go away to a police regional training centre, which I suppose in our case would have been Warrington. 10 weeks there, you learnt everything about the law and role plays. Back to division for 5 weeks, back to Bruges or wherever it was you were based for another 5 weeks, and then back to division for 5 weeks, each time out with a tutor. You then go independent, and in the remaining time up to your 2-year probation point, you'd have various phase courses. So, Richard, I know you've been looking at it. How's all that changed?
Well, as you said, Dave, when we joined, there was pretty much one route into policing. You'd go for an interview, then you go off on the training you described. There's now numerous routes into policing. If I could just go through them very, very quickly, and perhaps how we came to get here. Between 2010 and 2018, police officer numbers fell by 21,000. There are various reasons for that, but they fell. So there's a government manifesto commitment to recruit 20,000 police to bring us back up to strength by the end of March in 2023. In the back of this, we've also got our friends at the College of Policing who have gone along the way of trying to professionalise police by making a curriculum. So we've ended up with numerous different ways of getting into the police. If I can go through police constable apprenticeship degree or police constable degree apprenticeship, you join the police, and in the first 3 years in the police, you are holding down a job as a police officer and doing a degree. Now, initially that was on apprenticeship wages, which were pretty poor. I think a lot of forces have looked at that and gone, we're not going to pay apprenticeship wages, we're going to pay normal bobby wages for people doing that job because they're doing the job. The apprenticeship, constabularies are paying 0.5% of their annual pay bill in a government levy to fund a general national apprenticeship scheme. So there's a financial incentive, not a huge one, but an incentive to make the most of that levy because you'll get it back with police constable apprentices. There's still what's called Ep14, the initial police learning and development programme. That's probably the closest thing that's left to what we did. There aren't the residential courses where you get officers from lots of different forces all at one regional training centre. But there's elements of the training which is back at headquarters at training school and out on the street with a tutor constable showing you the ropes and getting you professional in your role. And Ep14 is the one that doesn't require a degree to enter. And that will be finishing, according to the government, in March of 2023. There'll be no more Ep14. Although a number of constabularies have said we can't recruit what we need without continuing to run Ep14. That will continue, but it will die. The idea is that after March of 2023, there will be no way of getting into the police other than rejoining or being a graduate entrant. The third way in, the degree holder entry programme, DHEP, they've all got acronyms, and that's I already have a degree, I want to join the police. Do I get some credit for having a degree so I don't have to do a whole new degree as an apprentice? Yes, you can. It's a 2-year programme and you get a graduate diploma at the end of it in policing. So there's still training in there. There's the Charity Police Now, which is still doing some work on recruiting police officers directly. They're looking, again though, I think what they describe as high calibre graduates or high potential or high octane graduates to go in, enter the police and do 2 years on community beat. That's their idea. There's then a thing called the professional policing degree route. Before I join the police, I do a degree in policing that satisfies the requirements for the apprenticeship or the degree holder programme already. I do a specialist programme in policing. That's licensed to universities, that curriculum by the College of Policing. As an example, I believe University of Central Lancashire, UCLan, charged £9,250 a year for that course.
Wow.
So by the end of your 3 years, you're about 28 grand in student debt. There is no guarantee that you will be recruited by a constabulary after you've done that degree.
It's a good job the initial wage for a constable PC is very good, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Hashtag sarcasm.
Indeed. There is also the route of rejoining. So if you've been in the police and you want to rejoin, this probably fits in with the idea in the Windsor report from some years ago that policing could be a dip in, dip out sort of occupation, which it isn't. And the last is detective entry for graduates, a bit like the degree holder entry programme, in that it is for graduates, but they want to go directly into CID or one of the other detective specialities, and they study for 2 years and get a graduate diploma, similar to the degree holder entry programme. So that's the current routes into policing.
So what are we actually trying to do here? Why is all this being implemented? My initial thoughts are we trying to do a direct entry for everybody? You know, trying to have an officer rank, but have everyone go through it in a way by having the degree?
I'm not sure if that was ever the case. I was lucky to be in at some of the early stages of the prototypes of the Police Education Qualification Framework, PEQF. The initial idea was that constables and sergeants should have a level 6 qualification, a degree, a graduate degree. Chief inspectors, superintendents should be looking at getting a level 7 qualification, a master's, and they'd be expecting people at the rank of chief constable, deputy assistant chief constable to be holding a level 8 qualification, a doctorate of some sort in policing. Obviously, as these have progressed, the idea of masters and doctorates for the higher ranks sort of fell away from the college plans, although they were definitely there at the start. They may come back, who knows? It may be that if you're ambitious and going for that third PIP or the crowns, that you have to consider taking on a master's degree, and if you want the highest rank, you have to have a doctorate level qualification. That was certainly in the thinking at the start of it.
Now, when I started, and can I say it was a couple of years after you two? That
Thank you.
I said a couple there. You didn't have to have a degree, but a lot of my peers at the time, I seem to remember, did have a degree, one element or another. For me, I didn't do a degree full-time, straight from A-levels, etc. I did an apprenticeship straight from school. And the reason I say that is we got 1 day a week to study, and that was 20% of our working week, which was written off to college. And it took me 7 years to get my degree in electronics, part-time. So the first thing that jumps out at me, and I've seen the comments on Twitter, and I've seen the comments that Nick Adderley put on Twitter as well.
Who's the Chief Constable of
Northamptonshire.
Northampton, who does interact with the public and officers very well, in my opinion. We're trying to do too much. I get the idea, and you know what, I don't mind the strategic intention of giving people a degree, making them not only fit for the policing workplace, but you know what, giving them something that if they did leave policing, that they could go on to and use a degree into another area of business and potentially come back, because again, that meets other strategic intentions. Doing a full-time degree whilst learning to be a cop, I don't know if you remember what it was like when you first landed on section as a probation or a student officer. It was hard. It was graft. And all these new things were whizzing around in your head. And having done a degree part-time over 7 years, there's no way I could have done a degree at the same time doing over 2 years.
Well, Nick Adderley's problem, which he was open about, was he's having apprentices, people on the apprenticeship leaving within weeks, having looked both at what the job is necessarily, but also what the demands of the apprenticeship degree has been on them. And he's in a force where 88% of his constables have less than 4 years service.
Wow.
Which is
Frightening.
It is frightening.
Well, that would have been unheard of. Are we trying to get to such a lofty position that we're actually breaking the business by attempting to get there?
I think we're trying to get there because of a document called Policing Vision 2025, a strategy for where those that set strategic direction would want us to be, want skills for roles to be defined, and you see the PEQF, the Educational Qualification Framework, sitting around that, consistent accreditation. And again, one of the ways you can do that is by saying it must be a degree level, for example. So you've got a consistent accreditation across all entrants. They've all got a degree or degree level qualification. To be aware of digital policing, and part of the PEQF and the new syllabus is to be aware of online fraud, digital crime, digitally enabled crime, We are recruiting pretty much digital natives, people who have grown up their entire life in an electronic environment where the internet and the World Wide Web are there, but we still need to have that. It talks about a confident professional workforce, and it talks about having a police service that can reduce crime. But that's the strategic direction, and that I think it flows from that if you want that police force in 2025, then you have a syllabus for them, and you have that syllabus accredited and a consistent accreditation on that, which would be a level 6, a degree level qualification.
Okay, so why does that have to be a degree? Again, it's a modern apprenticeship, isn't it? It's learning on the job. I did the same with MVQ level 3 at British Nuclear Fuels when I did my apprenticeship. I didn't have to do a degree, and it was not a prerequisite of me passing out of my apprenticeship. I got my MVQ, which was on-the-job training. And if this government is saying that there are many ways to learn, there are many ways to get on, and are advocating modern apprenticeships, this is an ideal area of business. It's very unique that you can't learn in a classroom. You need to be able to cut your teeth on the streets, for want of a better phrase.
Well, there's a few things for me, and at the end of this, our discussion at least anyhow, a few years ago, I interviewed Mike Cunningham, who was the then Chief Executive of the College of Police. And to be fair, he was very candid, and I'm grateful for his time. And he explained about the degree and direct entry level schemes. And it was basically to recognise the skills that police officers have. But it occurs to me that if we've got all these different sort of schemes, is the training different depending on which scheme you're on? Because if that is the case, you're going to have officers with potential shortfalls in skill areas. And the other thing is, if we're going to make these courses mandatory, will then that be an issue in court when giving evidence? And the defence barrister saying, well, you don't have a degree, are you really qualified to be a police officer? I mean, the way it could go is quite frightening for me.
I don't know if it'll go that way, but back in my day, I worked in Intel. I've done the Intel specialist course, so I can say it's on my portfolio, I'm an Intel specialist. When I've done CID, I've done the initial CID course, I've done the Tier 3 interviewer course. Some stuff I had to go out of force for, but we were able to do it. I have a diploma in source handling from Teesside University, and that was externally done probably 15 years ago, but I had to qualify to handle sources. I went to the Royal Military College of Science on a 2-week course, which is a national course on computer forensics, because you couldn't get that training in force, but it was a nationally accredited course.
The good thing about policing is you have your specialisms, don't you? Us three had 3 different specialisms in the police, and we've all taken extra qualifications to be able to do that.
Yeah.
Dave, yourself in the RPU world and the work you did with, was it child sexual exploitation? Mm-hmm. That is a very specialised piece of area of business. Mine with firearms and then firearms command. But why are we trying to give those specialisms to people right at the beginning? Why don't we say to people, there you go, there's your first 2 years, cut your teeth on it, go and be a cop, go and respond to grade 1s, go and help people, learn on the job, get your, for want of a better phrase, your MVQ level 3 in policing, and then if you want to specialise, go and be a detective, go and take your detective's exam, go and get your certificate in firearms. Why are we trying to do it right at the beginning? And why are we trying to do everything all at once, where it's breaking people? And we say we're a service which looks after people, and the Oscar Kilo stuff kicks in about well-being and managing your own workload and personal resilience and stuff. But this is going to break people. People are just going to think, forget this, I'm gone. I'm going to leave. And we're trying to recruit, we're spending all this money recruiting 20,000 people, and we're going to lose the vast majority of them because we are so short-sighted, and we're trying to cram everything into the next few years because it's all part of the uplift.
I think there's value in that. When I joined, I had no idea I would end up, for example, working on the high-tech crime unit doing forensic computer stuff.
Would you wanted to have joined? When you started...
I didn't even know it existed, Steve.
No, and I didn't want to join firearms when I first started. That interest comes when you start.
But if I'd done that training, if I'd gone off to Cranfield in year 1, year 2, and then come back to it 10 or 12 years later, it would have been gone. I'd say big endian, little endian, being able to decode binary by sight, all that sort of stuff.
We're in the presence of a professor here.
He's going to talk about C++ next.
Well, yeah, or Visual Basic, and all, but it would have gone, it would have atrophied because you're not using it. But when I learned about it, I was living and breathing it. It was my job. It was what I did. And I suspect the same when you're on road policing unit and you're doing your advanced driving course, you're doing your TPAC and all those sort of things. You're living and breathing it. You won't be asked to sit on it for 5 years and then suddenly bring it back from memory and do it again. Same with firearms. If you're living and breathing it, that's the time to do it.
It's a bit like learning a language, isn't it? The best way to learn a language is to live in the country that the language exists, you know.
And it's like a language that no one speaks, and it's quite hard to learn. And you've got to be in it to learn it.
I remember somebody telling me that if you were a good copper on the street, then there isn't a job you cannot do in the policing right up to chief constable. And when you look at, and I think of Mick Barton, who was chief constable of Durham Constabulary, wasn't he? Quite forward thinking. He was a DI when I joined, and he ended up being head of crime. And back then, if you could manage a department full of RC detectives, you've more than proven the fact that you've got people skills and management skills. And he worked his way up through the various ranks in the police, but he had a proven track record. And I'm just wondering, we were talking about it, weren't we, with the police action race plan, about it having critical friends and speaking with the Black Police Association and other people. The authors of these schemes, who are they talking to get that view from the shop floor?
I think it's more the talking to the people who say they don't have confidence in the police. The scandals, shall we say, that have been highlighted over the last few years. And I think they're trying to professionalise a service, not by professionalising it, but equating professionalism with academic knowledge. But it's your street smarts, it's your spider senses, it's your ability to process information quickly and make an assessment and being strong of character. It's all that. It's not academic prowess. And I think people have misinterpreted professionalism or professionalising the service with getting smart people in. And when I say smart people in, people who can pass degrees.
Do you think, probably a question for you, Richard, do you think these schemes have been designed to enable people to do what we can do, bearing in mind the cuts that we've had, rather than what we should be doing?
The idea is that somehow if you had better educated police officers with a higher educational attainment coming into the job, that they would be more effective and you'd get more crime solved and people safer for less money. The other thing, obviously, with the training is if you're doing the policing degree entry side of things, you're paying your own training costs. You're paying 28,000 best part off before you get a job. If you're doing the postgraduate joining police and getting a 2-year diploma of policing, again, you probably spent 28,000, 30,000 on your degree, and then the police puts you through a 2-year programme. On the degree apprenticeship, again, you are being paid. The initial thoughts was that you would pay apprentice wages as well, but I say that luckily seems to have gone by the board most places. But the initial idea with that was that you'd pay apprentice wages and get people policing for 3 years whilst doing the degree for free. But either way, it seems to be a way of cutting costs, and the idea that somehow if you give them a bit more training in high-tech crime, cybercrime, fraud, that these things will get better and you'll get more bang for your bucks out of a smaller number of police officers. I just don't think that's the case, particularly when you look at what the work we're doing. And what we're doing day to day, the grade 1, the grade 2 stuff, is, and we keep coming back to this, work around vulnerability. People that are vulnerable within society that need our help, mental health issues, missing from home issues, public order issues, policing nighttime economies, all of that stuff, none of which I would suggest, and for the vast majority of officers operating day to day, they don't need to know a great deal about frauds and about cybercrime because it's not their daily business.
We talked earlier, didn't we? We were talking about the age range of shifts when we joined, and sure. You had your old sweats and the van driver who would suck the oxygen out of the parade room, and then you had the younger cops like ourselves, and it was always that the older ones would let the younger ones crack on because we were keen and eager. It was quite a spread. I think nowadays the age range of a shift is a lot younger and a lot closer together. I'm just wondering, do we have any stats about wastage on these courses and dropouts?
I don't. I think there have been some put out on Twitter, but they were subject to not perhaps being quite right. I still think oddly, and it is odd, struggle to find anything published definitively on what the dropout rates are.
Curious that, isn't it?
Yes, it is. I'd be gathering those figures. I might not be publishing them, but I'd want to know what they were if I was putting all that money into a manifesto commitment to recruit 20,000 police.
Well, once they're through the door, it doesn't matter if they resign the day after, they are recruited as far as the figures. And again, we're meeting targets, we're hitting levels, and we're not actually looking at policing.
No, the authors of these schemes will say, and we talked about burnout, didn't we? And days time set aside for training. And the authors will say, well, that is written into the plan. If students aren't getting that time, then it's the fault of the force for which they're being employed.
Having relatively recently supervised a response team, let's say I start with 30 for a night shift, and with abstractions I'm probably down to 24. And then I lose 4 to bed watches, or we've got somebody at hospital, or I lose another 2 to high-risk missing from home inquiries. And this, folks, is everyday business. This is not just a rare, strange, unusual Saturday night in my hometown.
I think you're being quite conservative as well with those figures.
I'm trying to be. I don't want to over-egg the pudding, Steve. All of a sudden, I'm down to perhaps 15, of whom 2 or 3 will be probationers who aren't yet right for independent patrol, so they're double crewed up into a vehicle. So then I may be down to a dozen call signs, and I should have 30. And 1 or 2 of those probationers are, but I've got my degree to do, and I'm meant to have some protected study tonight. Well, I'm really sorry, but we're going to fall over. You know, I'm already deploying out to jobs. The other sergeant's deploying out to jobs. This is going to go bandy. I'm sorry, it's going to have to be another night. I'll try and fit you in some other time. It goes like that because there's never that good night when you've got 30 on and it's all hunky-dory.
Protective study doesn't mean that they turn up with the team. Because, one, you can't study on nights. Have you ever tried to do any kind of report on a night shift sometimes when it gets 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning? Protective study it's protective study. You will go to a learning environment, higher education institution, and you will learn the degree.
I mean, we have to have a certain amount of sympathy, don't we, with constabularies, because they're creaking and they're desperate to turn cops out. You can't blame them, I suppose.
No, not at all. And we've had chief constables try for judicial reviews and been knocked back because the focus has been we need that uplift and we need the uplift this way. And it's too much. And it's everybody in policing, from chief constables down, are saying it's breaking not only the system, the recruitment, but the people themselves. And we are losing potentially good people.
If you look at the total joins to date, just while this uplift's been running, and bearing in mind, even our own Police and Crime Commissioner locally said they would like Ep14 to continue for a further 2 years. Detective entry, that scheme where you're doing a graduate diploma but going straight into the CID or other, it's about 2,400. The degree holder entry, I've got a degree and I want to do a graduate diploma in policing, that's 5,007. Degree apprenticeship, just over 10,000. Coming in from police now, just over 1,000. But Ep14 has still supplied the best part of 12,000 officers, which suggests that regardless of what people may want to be happening, during this uplift, up until March next year, there's still going to be an awful lot of officers that are coming through on the Ep14, but after that, not so much. In fact, not at all.
Good. I just hope, and the Ep14 is the way to go, isn't it, at the moment? I will stress that I think that the degree side of it is a good idea if it was run independently and that people had the time. And I feel for the people in the universities and the higher education institutions who are trying to manage this when they're not getting the support from the forces for legitimate reasons. What I do hope doesn't happen is we get a 2-tier elite feeling towards this entry, that those with the Ep14 qualification who have learnt on the street are seen as lesser in some way, not only by the organisation and by the government, but also by their peers, to those who have got a degree.
There's some very tricky stuff to manage, I think, in the future with all degree entry. Policing is a fairly narrow triangle, ranks-wise. Once you start getting past sergeant and inspector, the opportunities are few and far between, I would suggest, in most constabularies. If you're all graduate entry, all people that have, or people that paid to do a degree, or people that have sweated through and managed to get the apprenticeship degree, but they've got a degree. Policing relies or has relied on people that are willing to spend their time as a constable on neighbourhood, on response. You know, the less glamorous units. Moving off those is seen as somehow a lateral relevance, as a promotion or a better place to be. And getting promoted is the same. Well, that's going to get to be a very, very slippery slope for people. I think there'll be so many people wanting to do the sergeant's exams because they've got that background, they've done that academic study, they think they can swing it. What are you going to do? There's only a limited number of space for sergeants, only a limited number of space for inspectors. And those are the ranks you can do an exam and get promoted to. Where do you go from there? How do you deal with the disappointed people who find they can't move sideways, they can't move upwards, and they really don't want to stay where they are? That's going to be really tricky.
So what you're saying is we're potentially, via the back door, creating an officer rank?
A little bit maybe, yeah.
Because those with the degree will rise to the officer ranks and those without may stay in the lower ranks.
That may happen, but I think there'll also be an issue with those with a degree not rising or moving sideways to where they want to go, because everybody wants to go, and it gets quite Darwinian at that point.
My concern, and it probably already is in crisis, but it's certainly a crisis at looming, is the detective world. I'm sure I read recently that the Met were offering thousands of pounds for their detective entry cops to switch over to uniform because they were so short, and certainly CID isn't the role, the prize role it once was. So it's not something you aspire to. And I know personal experience. I've seen people that have come up from response to do their 3 months with CID and have gone back down and said, I'm not going on there. I never finish on time. I mean, that's police work anyway, but I think it's exaggerated on CID. And then the knock-on effect is that, well, they tell all their peers, and then before you know it, you've a massive shortage in detectives, which is where we're at the moment, I think.
Really depressed about that. I was a career detective. I spent 20 years of my policing career in one detective post or another, and it's not what it was. Did I have time to complete complex and difficult inquiries? Absolutely. I had time to take down national fraud, for example. The DI said, yeah, we're going to do that, Richard, go to it. We had time to do proper investigations of the jobs that came to me. I was on serious sexual, on that side of detecting as well. Had the time to do the jobs. And I don't think, I think there's more of a filter as to what jobs get through. It has to be more high-end, more serious jobs before they get through to CID now. And secondly, I don't think there's the same amount of time that you're given to put into a quality investigation. Just my impression. I may be totally wrong, but I don't think I am. I don't think there's the same amount, and officers are juggling huge caseloads.
No, there isn't. It's a handover culture now. And there's not a criticism of those officers. It's just the way it's become.
But the way you mentioned there, Dave, about if you did do an attachment onto CID from response and you didn't like it, or let's say you did like it and you did apply and you got in, you knew what you were getting into. My worry is that the direct entry detectives are not going to do anything to increase those figures, really, because they're going to come in and think, hang on a minute, this isn't like an episode of Luther. What's going on? And then they're going to go. And where are they going to go to? Because are they going to go on response or what? Are we going to have that lateral movement as much as we have had in the police by pigeonholing and siloing all these specialisms separately? And are you going to have, sorry to interrupt there, but you're an example of it, Richard. Detectives going out, getting the stripes and going out and imparting that knowledge on young response officers. If you were a direct entry detective who then got their exams in, wanted to be a DS, would they be more like, they wouldn't know how to be a response officer. Never mind go and lead a section team and impart that knowledge. So it will be more siloed and people will be on such narrow tracks.
And we end up with the evil cousin of recruitment, which is retention. And the other aspect of that is if people find they are thwarted, they can't get to where they want to do, they don't like where they are, they leave. Tom Windsor talked about the dip in, dip out of policing culture and a policing career not being until pension anymore, but dip in, dip out, say nice things about policing in the rest of your life because you've been part of it. If people can't get that progression from recruitment, then I think we end up with retention issues as well.
Okay then, well, from a training aspect now, if we had a magic wand, how would we address the training?
I'd go Ip14 or something similar to it. I'm not sure if we can afford to do the regional training centres again. Those have all been sold, they're gone, it'd be difficult to bring them back. Similar to as in my career, if you want to train for a speciality, for the CID course, you have to study and there's an exam, and if you pass that, you get on the CID course and it's a qualification. If we become more in-service qualification based, perhaps, that's accredited, rather than you have to do a big chunk of accreditation right at the start before you even get in the job.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I would open up the regional training centres. I know the logistics might not be there, but what you need is a training centre central to the region, which has a lot of accommodation. And at the moment, until they knock it all down, that's what Lancashire does have. Is it that hard to do? And if the will was there and the appetite, they'd do it. Because there's lots to learn from your peers from other forces, from trainers from other forces. We seem to, I don't know why, but we seem to be going more siloed again within forces. And ground the bobby and do the MVQ style, like you said. And if you want to do get a couple of modules on detective, as well as doing your detective's exam, your national exam. Build up those modules, build up those points, and get recognised qualifications, which can be taken with anywhere within the policing framework of the UK. But don't do the degree all at once, like you say at the beginning. It's just too much. It's just too much, and it's breaking people.
Right, okay. Well, it's a complex and varied issue. I did say at the start of the discussion that we're going to play a clip from a previous interview with Mike Cunningham, so it's only fair that we get his point of view.
The Thin Blue Mind with Bradshaw, Horton and Thomas. Policing insights and opinions.
Now, you mentioned recruitment, and it's fair to say, however, that some of the aims of the college have caused controversy amongst rank and file police officers, with many of them openly critical and mistrusting of the college's aims. In particular is the new Police Education Qualifications Network and the direct entry scheme for superintendents. So what would you say to those officers?
One thing I would say right at the start is that I think that because the college was set up as part of an overall reforming of police effort on the part of the Home Office, I think that the College of Policing has got off to a start where it has found it difficult to connect with frontline officers. I'm the first to say that. I'd say it from any platform. And that connection with frontline policing is of fundamental importance to everything that we do. So I'm trying to, during my time as chief executive, I've really tried to make that connection much better. And of course, I know that there are some things that we have introduced that some people have kicked against. So new educational qualifications for people coming into policing. What people automatically think is that I and other people in the College of Policing are on some academic trip where we only want people with academic qualifications coming into policing. Actually, nothing could be further from the truth. The way that the PQF started out was to say, let's look at what a good constable does in the 21st century. What skills do they need to manage the amount of information that they have to hold, to make decisions based on that information, to exercise discretion, to use powers over their fellow citizen, to get involved in partnership working and leading partnership working often. And when you look at what is needed to train people for that level of work, to have a curriculum that's fit for purpose, and you build that curriculum, and then you come and say, right, how would you accredit that level of training? You come out with the answer, it's a degree. So actually, it's the degree that recognises the complexities and the level at which officers are working. And I see that as a good thing. I see that as a recognition that what I did as a constable, what you did and do as a constable, actually are really highly valued things. And if we're going to properly reward the training that you do for that, then the proper reward for that training is the degree. So that's why we landed at it. Now, part of the things that we do in policing in the college is about change. And I get it. People don't like change, and sometimes that change hasn't been well sold or well represented by the college as well. So I take that on board, and we need to do a lot more to get these messages across as to why these things are in place. Let me turn to direct entry, should I, seeing as you've raised it, Dave. So direct entry superintendents, direct entry inspectors are things that we have tried. We have looked to see whether you can actually develop leaders in a different way in policing. And I think that's a very legitimate thing to do. We've had a very traditional way of bringing people through policing in the way that I went through it. You went up through the ranks, and that was fine. That works very well. But are there other things that we can do to get a further mix of people coming into policing? And we've tried direct entry superintendents and direct entry inspectors. And what the evaluation of both of those schemes have told us is that actually it is possible to come into policing and be effective at superintendent or inspector level. But equally what we're seeing is that there's not a huge appetite for it on the part of chief constables. And so we're looking at that to see whether, in fact, the continuation of direct entry superintendents or inspectors is viable going forward, because if chief constables don't take them, then we need to question that.
Why do you think it is that chief constables aren't particularly keen on the scheme?
I think there's two reasons. Some are, and they're very public about it, just against the idea that people can come in that way in the first place. They're few and far between, but there are some of those people. And then there are others who have very few opportunities to promote somebody to superintendent within a year. I was in this position when I was chief constable in Staffordshire. I had very few opportunities each year to promote people. And I felt that, and other chiefs feel now, that actually to bring somebody in directly actually was problematic for people who were coming through and were really chomping at the bit for that next rank. And so that is proving a bit of a challenge, and we need to look to see whether it's viable going forward. But what I would say is that, and I've met many direct entry superintendents, there are some very, very high quality people who have come in as direct entry, both at superintendent and inspector level. So whatever we do going forward, we need to recognise that some colleagues are making a great contribution having come in that way.
The Thin Blue Mind with Bradshaw, Horton and Thomas. Policing insights and opinions. Well, that's it for this week. Thank you for joining us. This podcast is in partnership with Policing TV, the leading policing media channel. So until the next time and the next podcast, take care.